McCreary, Mosley, Thompson Raider, Trent.
We have a quorum. Before we do anything else, because a lot of people have probes and things going on and we have a quorum, I'm going to quickly go into executive session. I make a motion we go into executive session. Do I have a second? All in favor, please say aye. Opposed? We're now in executive session. The first thing I want to do is bring up Senate Bill 638 before the committee. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed? 638. Senate Bill 638 is now before the committee. I move that we do pass Senate Bill 638. Do I have a second? Second. Discussion. Senator Fitzwater, you want to remind everybody what this bill was? Any questions on or any more discussion? Senator Mosley?
So this, you have somebody that takes on a huge amount of energy, you would reduce the cost across the board because they're taking on such a big piece. So you want somebody who wants to come to Missouri that's going to have a huge gas bill. It's the same reason why we passed an economic development rate for electric corporations, is to encourage that economic activity, and then it spreads that cost over a huge amount of power to all users of the power.
Further discussion? Seeing none. So I've already made the motion to do pass, and we had a second. So Michelle, will you please call the roll?
Senator Cierpiot.
Aye.
Fitzwater. Bean. Bernskoetter. Brown. Esslinger. May. McCreary. Mosley.
No? She votes no.
Thompson Raider. Trent.
By your vote of 5-1, hang on just a second. By your vote of 5-1, the motion does pass, and we have approved. We have voted to pass Senate Bill 638, and until the committee meeting is over, I'm going to leave the board open for the missing members if they'd like to vote, as long as they don't change the outcome. I next move that we bring Senate Bill 567 before the committee. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Senate Bill 567 is before the committee. Also, there is a committee substitute on this. I think hopefully everybody has it. This was a bill that I presented a week ago, I believe, on water utilities. And the committee substitute adds a provision that if the Public Service Commission does not issue a decision within 6 months regarding an application of a large water public utility acquiring a small water utility, such application shall be automatically approved. It also removes public utility and reverts to the current language, a water or sewer corporation. Any discussion? Seeing none, then yes, Senator Mosley. Presently, no. The reason is this is mostly smaller companies that are being acquired by other mid-sized companies. And so the thought is 6 months is enough time. Once we get to the floor, we may have to revisit that or do, like you said, maybe some kind of an appeal or something to make it extended. Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, then I move that we adopt Senate Committee substitute for Senate Bill 567. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I move that we do pass Senate Committee substitute for Senate Bill 567. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Michelle, will you call the roll?
Senator Cierpiot.
Aye.
Fitzwater. Bean. Bernskoetter. Brown. Esslinger. May. McCreary. Mosley. Thompson Raider. Trent.
By a vote of 7-0, we have voted to pass. Senate Committee substitute for Senate Bill 567. And again, I'll leave the board open until the end of the committee if other members want to come in. Thank you for your patience. The first up today, we're going to hear from Senator O'Laughlin, Senator Fitzwater on Senate Bill 709 and 717 together. I believe they're nearly identical. Senator O'Laughlin and Senator Fitzwater, proceed when you're ready.
I asked him if he wanted me to do all the talking. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Cindy O'Laughlin, Senator from the 18th District. And
Senator Fitzwater, 10th District.
A tag team.
so we have actually identical bills, and they both have to do with power generation. The reason that I filed the bill, and I imagine the same for Senator Fitzwater, is with the rush to connect to renewables. As we look across the country, we see a lot of states who are experiencing rolling blackouts and don't have transmission capability to withstand some of the extremes that we often encounter. So today I am presenting Senate Bill 709. The legislation helps protect the security of our power grid. The bill requires power generation companies to create equal or greater replacement generation before closing or retiring already existing baseload power generation facilities. The rush towards renewable intermittent power is making our electricity grid less reliable and less dependable. There will be a witness. I have a witness here who is an expert who can provide you with additional facts about the bill. But I can tell you that what the bill does do is it makes sure the amount of reliable electric generation resources does not drop below the current level, requires that new generation be fully constructed and tied to the Missouri electric transmission system before closing the existing generation. The new generation must be capable of providing an equal amount of reliable electricity as the power plant being closed. The bill requires the electric utility to certify to the PSC, the General Assembly, and the Governor that the new electric generation is fully constructed, tied into the Missouri transmission system, and meets the standards for reliable electric power by the Regional Reliability Organization. It helps protect Missourians from blackouts caused by extreme weather events. What it does not do, it does not prohibit the closure of a power plant, though I personally am not in favor of that. It does not tell the electric utility what type of new electric generation to build. It provides the electric utility flexibility by allowing them to build a new generation in a neighboring state or purchase the power from an existing electric generating source. With that, I don't know if you would like me to bring up Randy Eminger. He is here. He's the Executive Director of the Energy Policy Network. He has studied this across the country. He has some additional facts that might be of interest to you, but I'll give him my seat, but before he comes up, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Senator Fitzwater, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I have identical bills. So Senator O'Laughlin sent me this idea, and I actually didn't even respond to her. I just went ahead and went to research and filed it. We filed it the same day because I didn't respond to her. That's why we have two identical bills that are so close in numbers. But really thought the idea was important to have this discussion because we have to fight for our baseload power needs. And I don't think renewable is going to do it, at least in the short term. So that idea really piqued my interest, and so I appreciate the senator asking if I'd be interested in this language, and was glad to file it and glad to be sitting here with her on this issue.
Okay. Well, I know this summer, Michelle and I have talked, I'm going to look into doing something that gives the PSC some overall responsibility over reliability rather than just rates, and also something that shows that power in Missouri is, if tough times appear, is reserved for Missourians before they ship it out to bail out another state that's going too far. So that's something we're going to look at too. How many people want to testify in favor of this bill? How many opposed? Okay. We've got several bills to hear today, so please make your testimony as short and concise as possible. The first person for speaking in favor, Senator Laughlin, you mentioned somebody. Are they here?
Yes,
They can come up.
yes, he is here, and I thought he
Okay.
might come up for a few minutes
Sure.
and give you some additional information.
Okay. And everybody, please bring forward a witness form if you testify.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. My name's Randy Eminger. I'm Executive Director of the Energy Policy Network. We're a nonprofit association dedicated to research and education on baseload generation, primarily coal-based generation. Just a couple of quick facts. With MISO and Southwest Power Pool, 45 power plants, baseload power plants, have been closed in MISO in the past 5 years. 29 coal, 15 natural gas, and 1 nuclear plant for 17,000 megawatts of generation, enough to generate electricity for 11 million average-sized homes. In addition, according to MISO's website, the replacement power will be 92% intermittent power, wind and solar, by 2030. Southwest Power Pool is very similar. They've closed 15 baseload power plants. They plan to close 9 more by 2030 for another 3.7 million homes of average electricity between now and 2030, and replace it with 93% wind and solar based on the announcements they have on their website. Why the rush to close fossil fuel power plants? Basically, they're threefold. One, financial incentives. You have federal production tax credits of 2.75 cents per kilowatt hour that wind and solar both get for 10 years after they build their projects. You have also states that surround you, like Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, that have pledged zero carbon and are through state laws and executive orders pushing to close their fossil fuel plants to meet the zero carbon by 2040 and 2045. Also in Southwest Power Pool, you're looking at Colorado, New Mexico, and Louisiana that have made that pledge as well. And thirdly, I think EPA, the Biden administration, has a number of rules out which are specifically aimed at fossil fuel power generation. And you might hear from utilities that that's the reason we're having to close these plants, is really because EPA is forcing us to. We've found through our research that's not necessarily the case. Even though meeting the new ozone transport rule might require adding additional controls, select catalytic reduction, SCRs are about $200 million to $300 million for a typical power plant, a coal fuel plant. Now, that's a lot of money, but $200 to $300 million is not near as much as $2 billion for the replacement that we estimate for wind and solar. That doesn't include the transmission cost associated with that wind and solar project to replace that power. So the problems we found with bringing on new wind and solar of late, basically post-COVID, one, we have supply chain issues. Getting the solar panels from China has been a problem. There's been tariffs associated with that as well. Electric transmission, we found that throughout the United States, we don't have near enough electric transmission to bring power all the way from western Oklahoma or West Texas or Kansas or Nebraska into the large cities like Chicago and Minneapolis. Third is really the rapid growth since COVID. We've had economic growth that's been a lot quicker than what a lot of, I think, the electric utilities and the RTOs have thought there was going to be. In Missouri specifically, last year, you closed the Merrimack plant, 900 megawatts. of generation. Announced also in 2025, 2 years from now, the Sioux plant is a 1,000-megawatt plant that Ameren plans to close. And then in 2028, the Rush Island power plant, which is 1,200 megawatts, is scheduled to close. Altogether, these plants are over 3,000 megawatts of generation, enough to power 2 million average-sized homes in Missouri. I guess one of the problems we find, and I'll end with this, is that some utilities, we found one in Texas recently that closed a 700-megawatt coal fuel power plant before they had the replacement power in place, the wind and solar. They thought they could get it. They haven't. 2 wind projects, 1 solar project they plan on building. Now they're saying they won't have those projects online till the end of 2025. So here they closed last month a 700-megawatt coal plant and have 2 years before they hopefully have the wind and solar in place. The other is they're replacing the 700-megawatt plant with 1,000 megawatts of wind and solar. But as you look at both the Southwest Power Pool and MISO, they show that wind and solar usually generate their efficiencies. Wind is in the 25% range. Solar's closer to 35 to 40% range on efficiency. Therefore, you need usually 4 times more wind, 3 times as much solar to equal a baseload plant, whether it's nuclear, coal, or natural gas. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do you know, in the last 10 years, do you know how many power plants China has built, coal-fired plants?
The average is 1 unit per month, not plant. Some plants have 4 units in them, so they'll usually have somewhere in the vicinity for 5 or 6 plants per year added, which they're large, very large power plants. They're also building a lot of coal plants in Africa now for their mining operations and things.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Senator Kerr. Senator Trent, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you said in your testimony that some of the states in the MISO territory are basically decarbonizing by a virtue of state policy, and that's being pushed by the federal government as well. So my question is, how many places in the MISO footprint would it still be legal and economically feasible to build a new fossil fuel baseload plant?
Well, there's 14 states in MISO, and I believe there's 5. There's a map, I can't remember what page I put it on, that shows the states that have
maybe?
zero carbon. But
Is that page 5 maybe?
page 5, yes. And so I believe there's probably 9 states where you could build fossil generation.
And Missouri looks like is one of those.
What?
And Missouri is one of those places,
Missouri
it
is
looks
one
like.
of those. Yes, sir.
Okay, and about the economic feasibility of a new fossil fuel baseload plant, what does that look like right now?
Building a new natural gas is not going to be as expensive as the coal, but they have built, I mean, the newest coal plant in the nation is literally 100 miles from here. It's the Prairie States, and it was in 2012. So we haven't built a coal plant in 10 years. But to answer your question, I can get back with you on the cost of building a new coal plant. Be hard under this administration.
So I guess my question is that if new generation capacity has to come online before old capacity can shut down, do you perceive there could be any issues with the economic and legal infeasibility on one side and that mandate on the other?
I really don't, because the plants you have in Missouri are currently, the typical lifespan of a coal fuel power plant is 60 years. Most of these are closing down, are 40 to 45 years old, maybe 46, 47 years old. So they still have a decade or so left in them. It's kind of a shame you're closing a plant early, in my view, even though you have to put additional environmental control.
So these are unnecessary closures is what?
Right.
Yeah, okay. And are there any other jurisdictions that are experimenting with this kind of mass transition? I think other countries Germany just recently closed down a lot of nuclear power plants. Do you have any insight into how that is impacting consumer prices and energy availability in those countries?
It it has definitely increased the cost dramatically in Germany and Great Britain and most of Europe. Of course, part of that has to do with the war in Ukraine, but the export of liquefied natural gas from the U.S. has skyrocketed.
I mean, I've heard that Germany, it was almost a 100% increase overnight in some places, but I don't have any confirmation if that's true. Do you have any insight on specifics?
I've heard the same. I'll get that to you.
Okay.
I do know that they have opened up a number of their. One of the things that Germany did right is even though they closed their coal plants, they didn't tear them down. Mm-hmm. They left them in what is called spinning reserve, so you can bring them back up.
And we've only talked about fossil fuels, but nuclear power is an important baseload power as well. Do you have any insight or any commentary on small modular reactor technology or any of the newer nuclear technology that's emerging and how that could fit into this?
Well, I do believe nuclear is probably the most reliable power you can have out there, right above coal fuel generation because of the on-stock. The smaller nuclear reactors, we'd all like to see that take off. You have to go through the same permitting process. You have to have storage. It's not as easy as it sounds. Sure, you can build them modular and bring them on site, but you still have to go through a lot of the additional.
Yeah, the federal regulatory
Right. And
hurdles
state.
all still exist. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate your insight here.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
Next in favor, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ray McCarty, Associated Industries in Missouri, want to support the concept behind the bills. As we headed into the last summer, MISO issued a warning that so many states within the MISO network had gone renewable that there was a chance we would not have reliable power, and they were warning about blackouts and brownouts and things like that. Missouri was not in that category because Missouri produces enough, but we're trying to support everyone else in the network. So it is a problem that needs to be addressed. Whether this is the exact way to do it and whether the right words are in there or not, I'm not sure. I think there has to be recognition that nuclear is something that is able to have the fuel on site. But we saw with natural gas even you have difficulties if you don't have the fuel on site. Coal provides that. You can have the fuel on site, be able to generate electricity in a reliable way. So I think it's a great place to start the conversation. And so from our organization as the users of the electricity, we think it's great that the state is starting to look at this and happy to support any new ideas out there.
Thank you. Questions for Ray? Thank you, Ray. Next in favor, please come forward.
Chairman, committee members, my name is Warren Wood, and I'm Airman Missouri's Legislative and Regulatory Vice President. I'm also an engineer who spent years designing coal, nuclear, and natural gas electric generating units. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on Senate Bill 709 and 717. These bills hit an area of enormous importance for our quality of life and our economic vitality, and that's reliable electricity. I lived in California during the electric outages in the mid-90s caused by the shortage of electricity during unusually hot weather and understand the impacts of these events. As an electric service provider, I can tell you that we are observing an increasing frequency of large generating units being closed nationally. I would also note that regional transmission and national reliability organizations are urgently noting the need for greater electric generating capacity and transmission if we are to keep the electric grid reliable. As a participant in the legislative and regulatory process with energy projects, I can also state without hesitation it has never been more difficult to build any type of electric generators and the associated infrastructure needed for the growing needs of our 3 million Missourians that we serve with electricity. That said, I would note that Missouri has a thorough integrated resource planning process, or IRP process, that Ameren, Evergy, and Liberty are all subject to, that's overseen by the Missouri Public Service Commission. Two of the key objectives of this IRP are keeping electricity reliable and affordable for the customers and communities that we that we serve. I look forward to working with the senators on the interim as we develop this policy and move it forward. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify on this legislation. I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Ward. Anybody have questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Next in favor, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Kara Hoover on behalf of Evergy. We would also like to go on record in support of the concept of this. Reliability is extremely important to our company. As Warren mentioned, we are part of the Southwest Power Pool, and we actually had to increase our operating reserve margins from 12 to 15% after Winter Storm Uri. We conduct an in-depth analysis every 3 years as a part of the IRP process as well, and to understand what load is coming in and off of the system to make sure we have the ability to meet it. Technology has come a long way with renewables, and at Evergy they are an important part of our fleet, but we still need to have base load dispatchable power for those times when the sun isn't shining and wind isn't blowing. We agree with the sentiment of reliability, but we do think that there is maybe a different way to word the megawatt for megawatt challenge with technology changes that are coming our way. And we'd love to work with the senators in the interim on that topic.
Thank you. Questions for Kara? Seeing none, thank you. Anybody else in favor? Anybody opposed?
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Berg. I'm with the Missouri Sierra Club, and we want to get on record opposed with the general concept. We want to make sure there's reliable energy for everyone, but making sure that it's the amount we have now or more without looking at the details, without looking at issues of demand-side management, of improving energy storage and battery storage. We don't need to put it on the book that the amount has to go up and up. I mean, lots of things can happen. Population can go down. So we support reliable energy, but not mandating this amount and higher regardless of what the technological changes or what the situation is.
Thank you for the testimony. Anybody have questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Anybody else in opposition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Arnie C., A.C. Dinoff, State Public Advocate, and I'm opposed to both of these bills, SB709 and SB717. Again, this legislation is for big utility companies, and the Missouri consumers are left in the dark. We want clean power in our state. We want to make sure that we have enough power, but we don't want to go to the coal using of these plants after their usefulness currently. We don't want to hurt the environment, and we don't want to pollute the environment. We don't want to hurt workers that work for these utility companies. This bill has a lot of liability and a lot of exposure to these utility companies. The environment is of immediate concern, and so are the health of the utility electric workers. For those reasons, I oppose SB709 and SB717. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Anybody else opposed to these bills? Anybody for information purposes? That will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 709 and 717. Next up, we'll hear House Committee Substitute for House Bill 631. Representative Houx, proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, Representative Dan Houx, representing Johnson County, the 54th District. In front of you today, you have House Committee Substitute for House Bill 631. The underlying bill deals with the Industrial Mining Advisory Council. Currently, right now, they're not able to have a quorum. This just changes the makeup of it to have a quorum. It's the same as Senate Bill 109 that passed out of this body a while back. In the House, we added a couple amendments. One of them are fees for DNR, fees extension, and then also earth and basin. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions for Representative Houx? How many people want to testify in favor of this bill? Okay. Any opposed? Okay. Again, if you could keep it as brief as possible, I'd appreciate it. Please come forward. Those in favor, please.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'm Dan Kleinsori, Executive Director of the Missouri Limestone Producers Association, here to testify in favor of House Bill 631, which has three components that either this committee or the Senate as a whole have already seen. The first one is the Industrial Minerals Advisory Council language, similar to Senator Bernskotter's Senate Bill 109. The Senate passed that out earlier this year. Much of the bill consists of DNR fee sunsets, which this committee passed last week. And then finally, the earthen basin definition language was passed by this committee on March 7th. I would be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you. Next in favor, please come forward. Please leave your witness form there and tell us who you are.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Mike Sutherland, Deputy Director of the Department of Natural Resources, here to testify in favor of House Bill 631. We have worked with stakeholders on all parts of the bill and are in favor of all the sections of it. We're especially important for the fee sunsets to continue the operation of the department with cooperation of stakeholders and not using general revenue for that purpose. So I'd be glad to answer any questions.
This witness? Seeing none. Thanks, Mike. Next in favor, please come forward.
Hi, my name is Annika Cariaga. I'm a professional engineer in civil engineering. I've worked for Midwest Environmental Consultants for over 20 years. I'm older than I look. We support the proposed changes to the Industrial Mineral Advisory Council and to the Earth and Basin language. We have done permitting for quarries across the state for over 30 years. I'm also Vice President of the Missouri Society of Professional Engineers, MSPE, and Chair of the Government Relations Committee. MSPE worked with MDNR in crafting the bill fee language that is included as an amendment to this House Bill 631. The language is similar to Senator Bernskotter's Senate Bill 395, with the exception of the sunset extensions are for 6 years in the House version instead of the 10 years. The bill extends the sunsets on existing funding sources. It does not raise any fee or change DNR's authority. These funds are used to ensure the state maintains its delegated authority from EPA to administer federal environmental laws. Stakeholders pay these fees instead of asking the general public to fund these programs through their taxes. With the potential loss of almost $25 million for funding to MDNR and the threat of losing Missouri's delegated authority program from EPA, it is very important to get this bill to the governor's desk before the sunsets expire. The Missouri Society of Professional Engineers supports House Bill 631. Thank you for your time and consideration of this important bill.
Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Next in favor?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ray McCarty again, Associated Industries of Missouri. I want to go on record in support of this as we did Senate Bill 395. And also there's language in here that we talked about before that ensures that the Department of Natural Resources does as they do today and don't base their actions on just simple guidance documents, which are nothing more than memorandum from bureaucrats. So we're supportive of that and all the other parts of the legislation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ray. Questions? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thanks.
In favor, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark Rhodes. I'm here on behalf of the American Council of Engineering Companies, Missouri, just to go on record in support of the bill.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none. Thank you. Next in favor?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Jacob Knable with Missouri Corn Growers Association. I'd like to go on the record in support of House Bill 631, especially the earth and basin language that's in there. Not everybody realizes it, but although farmers rely a lot on crushed rock, they're also relying on agricultural lime to balance the pH of their soil. And with soil inputs already being up nearly 125% since 2020 alone, we do not wish for any additional costs to possibly be passed on to farmers in the form of additional compliance costs. And additionally, we are supportive of some cleanup language, which we've been working with the bill sponsor, as well as the committee chairman and the possible substitute. Would be happy to talk about that with anyone else more in detail later on.
Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Anybody else in favor? Anybody in opposition, please come forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Arnie C., AC Dinoff, State Public Advocate. I oppose this HB 631 in the House. It changed from just the Mineral Advisory Board to also setting out the fees for 10 years. I want to make sure that these fees remain the same, and the actual cost of running the programs and inspections by the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. I'm highly opposed to the makeup of the board. Instead of having 3 from one discipline, I propose 8 members from the 8 various mining fields or disciplines, and 1 member citizen at large. I think that would be, first of all, if there's any tie votes, 9 members would break that tie, and all of the fields of discipline in the mining fields or mining businesses would be represented. For those reasons, I oppose HCS HB631. Thank you.
Seeing none. Anybody else in opposition? Anybody for information purposes? That will conclude the hearing on House Committee Substitute for House Bill 631. Next up, we'll have Senator Bernskoetter for Senate Bill 639.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, like the chairman said, my name is Mike Bernskoetter, representing the 6th District. The Senate Bill 639 creates a paint recycling program. This will allow people to safely dispose of their old paint. The program will be funded by paint manufacturers and administered by the Department of Natural Resources. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions for Senator Bernskoetter? Seeing none. How many people want to testify in favor of this bill? How many opposed? Okay, in favor, please come forward, somebody. Thank you.
My name's Heidi McAuliffe. I'm with the American Coatings Association. I'm Vice President of Government Affairs. The paint industry completely supports this bill. We developed this program. I'd like to initially thank Senator Bernskoetter for bringing this bill forward. This is a program that allows folks to empty their garages and basements of leftover paint. It is managed in a way that is environmentally responsible. Our goal is to make this as convenient and easy for consumers as possible, and to divert as much of this leftover paint from the waste stream going into landfills. The way we do this is we work with retailers, ask them to volunteer to be collection sites. Consumers can then bring this product to retailers. We send a transporter to pick it up, then take it to a paint processor where it is recycled into recycled content paint and or otherwise managed responsibly. As I said, this is a very convenient program for all the residents of Missouri. It is a zero-cost program for the state, as we will work very closely with MDNR, pay them for their oversight activities. And we do this, it also provides cost savings for the municipalities and localities. You'll hear in a few minutes from the municipalities to talk about how much money it could save them. We're asking for this legislation because we do need antitrust protection in order to bring this program to the state of Missouri. It's been operating for about 10 years across the country in 11 other states. To date, we've collected about 65 million gallons of paint, which we've been able to divert from the landfills and manage the end of life of that product in a very efficient and environmentally responsible manner. So we're very much in support of the program. We very much want to bring this to Missouri. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions to this witness? Seeing none, thank you. I'm sorry.
I don't really have a question, but I just want to thank you for coming by my office and speaking to me about the bill prior to the committee.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next in favor, please come forward.
Members of the committee, my name is Leland Rehard. I am a Senior Associate of Policy and Programs for the Product Stewardship Institute, a 20-year-old national not-for-profit with membership from 47 state agencies and hundreds of local governments. I'm here in support of Senate Bill 639 and want to sincerely thank Senator for sponsoring the bill. PSI brought the problem of leftover paint to the paint industry's attention nearly 20 years ago and worked with that industry and other stakeholders for 4 years to negotiate the model agreement that was signed in 2007 by the industry, multiple state and local government agencies, and paint recyclers. This model is the basis for the laws that are enacted in 11 states, is also the basis for this bill, and represents more than a decade of experience and updates to our continued relationship with the American Coding Association, our membership, and local governments. Nationally, paint stewardship has saved local governments more than $240 million, has helped create over 200 jobs, and established more than 2,000 voluntary collection sites, 70% of which are retail locations. Our organization has conducted several technical evaluations of paint care programs and found widespread satisfaction with retailers, municipal governments, and other stakeholders. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Next in favor, please come forward.
Good afternoon. My name is still Michael Berg, representing the Missouri Sierra Club, and just want to go on record in support of Senate Bill 639. When you make it easier for folks to recycle, they usually do, and we support that.
Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you, Mike. Next in favor, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name's Steve Hobbs. I'm a registered lobbyist and executive director for the Missouri Association of Counties. You may be saying, what are the counties doing here? Well, unfortunately, we've seen a lot of problems in our counties over the years, especially the rural ones where there's really not access to the disposable to be able to dispose of paint. And when people don't have a place to dispose it, they go along our county roads and dump the paint in the ditch, and then our road crews are dispatched to clean it up, or it ends up in our landfills. And so I appreciate the senator bringing this bill forward, and I hope to be able to work with him as it moves further on. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you. And please leave a witness form. Next in favor, please come forward.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Heather Pursuti. I'm the VP of Operations with GDB International. We're one of the largest paint recyclers in North America. And I request your favorable support of SB639 for Missouri Paint Stewardship. GDB is a paint recycler and manufacturer with over 25 years of experience in recycling post-consumer paint back into high-quality paint. We've been working with Paint Care for over a decade to recycle the leftover paints and diverting millions of gallons of paint from going into the landfills. Each year, about 10% of the paint purchased by Missouri residents becomes leftover, resulting in more than 1.3 million gallons of leftover paint per year just in the state of Missouri. And all of the paint was to be managed properly through household hazardous waste collections would cost more than $10 million a year. SB639 would establish a convenient statewide paint collection and recycling program for all of the Missouri residents and businesses that is operated and financed by the paint industry. Paint stewardship legislation is actively supported by the ACA, and it's also supported by a vast majority of the paint retailers who provide these paint collection services to the consumers, which would bring more customers into their stores. It's consistent with paint steward legislation in 10 plus other states, and GDB is active in recycling in a majority of those states. Passing this legislation would not only save local governments and taxpayers money, but it will also create a lot of jobs within the state. And we look forward to seeing this pass for the Missouri residents. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Next in favor? Seeing nobody left. Those in opposition, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is David Overfelt. I'm the president of the Missouri Retailers Association. The manufacturers don't pay for this. The retailer has to bear the brunt of this. The retailer with low profit margins, competing with surrounding states. This bill is only passed in the northeast states on the west coast, Colorado and Minnesota, from what I can find, in the District of Columbia. You're giving taxing authority over a Missouri business to a third party outside of the state of Missouri who gets to decide what they want to tax. I'll give you an example of what we can do in Missouri. We took 50 cents per tire and we cleaned up 20 million tires. You know, we could do this for less. We could do this with the businesses cooperating, but this is forced on us. It gives them more protection of their market share. And frankly, I don't see this as a free enterprise bill and one that there's a real partnership. It pretty well dictates what we have to do. The only thing we don't have to do is actually recycle it at our facilities if we don't want to. But we're the ones who have to bear the brunt of this. And frankly, we think it should be passed in the other 15 blue states that haven't passed this. And I'd like to see Illinois at least, and maybe Kansas and some others before we start talking about giving a third party taxing authority over businesses in the state of Missouri.
So it is volunteer in the sense whether you actually set up the recycling, but the fees that are being paid or not, because they're from the manufacturer.
Yeah, they're going to charge us no matter what.
Okay.
And frankly, and then of course they get protections here. You know, we collect a lot of stuff at retail. We collect computers, printers, batteries, a lot of the lithium batteries to keep them out of the landfill. And you know, I look at those as more as product stewardship. This isn't really product stewardship where the manufacturer is actually funding this and taking responsibility and working with the retailers. This is basically passing a statute making the retailer pay for their product stewardship and then giving them basically a little bit more protections toward their market share and competition that maybe new entrepreneurs that want to get into the paint business.
Okay, so somebody said it was 10% is about the average waste, I guess, or recyclable paint when you buy it.
Oh, I can't believe that. I looked at the last waste stream and I couldn't even find paint in the numbers at all.
Well, I'm just thinking if they're charging 80 cents a gallon and only 1 in 10 gallons is actually recycled, that means it'd be $8 per gallon, so to speak.
Well, you know, everybody's got paint. I've got a 5-gallon white can of paint from my wife's house that she sold. We're going to probably use that. I've got a lot of paint in the basement, mostly so I remember what the color is. But those paints have all dried up, but I still want to remember those colors if I want to repaint the rooms easier. So a handful of cans. We've got household hazardous waste drop-off. You've collected almost $200 million for recycling programs that have been dispersed throughout the state over the past 30 years. You can always tweak the law to tell the districts they need to share more money for the collection process. Because remember, they do ban some items. David Claridge worked on that years ago, but you could tweak that law to give the incentives for these grants to go to more drop-off for the consumers.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for David? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anybody else in opposition, please come forward. Anybody for information purposes, please come forward.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, committee members. I am testifying for informational purposes only. My name is Nadja Carpolo, and I am an environmental planner with the Mark Solid Waste Management District. I serve as the chair of the paint work group for the Missouri Product Stewardship Council. Thank you for your time this afternoon. The Missouri Product Stewardship Council is a coalition of local governments, businesses, and other stakeholders that aim to reduce waste, increase reuse and recycling, save local governments money, and support jobs. For 3 years, our work group has conducted data collection, panel discussions, presentation, and have had conversations with MDNR, elected officials, retailers, and other organizations about paint stewardship in Missouri. It's estimated that over 1 million gallons of paint go unused in Missouri each year, based on our paint sales in our state. I bet at least 10 or 15 of us have, in this room, have leftover paint in our basement or our garage. So this map here, and I'm leaving copies for you, but if you can kind of see here, this map, the yellow, the dominant color, represents limited access to drop-off, meaning only oil-based paint is accepted. Collection events are few, and if there is a facility in the area, hours are limited, with some requiring appointments. Some facilities limit the amount of paint that can be dropped off. The green represents areas where both oil-based paint and latex paint are accepted at a facility or at a collection event. And the red represents areas where no paint service is existing at all. And keep in mind that of all the leftover paint, 80% is latex and 20% is oil-based. So currently, paint drop-off programs are far and few and are not convenient. A statewide paint stewardship program in Missouri would increase access points for residents and businesses, including schools and local government, to properly manage their leftover paint. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Anybody else for information purposes? That will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 639. Next up, we'll do Senate Bill 520. And you've got the... Okay.
Proceed when you're ready, Senator.
Chairman and committee members, I'm Mike Cierpiot from the 8th Senate District in Jackson County, here to present Senate Bill 520. This bill is affixed to the securitization bill we passed in 2021. Securitization is a tool that allows utilities to reduce the customer cost of retiring power plants that have reached the end of their useful life. When a utility files a securitization notice, the PSC has to contract a financial advisor for the bonding. This is the language explicitly exempting the hiring of the legal and or financial advisors for the PSC for the state procurement processes outlined in Chapter 34. If they follow the process, it will eat away 215 days. It will eat into the 215 days they have to respond to a filing. This allows the process of securitization to meet the prescribed deadlines easier. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none. Who's here to testify in favor of Senate Bill 520? Come on up. You've done this before, Doug. Proceed when you're ready, and please leave a witness form for our records.
I did. Thank you.
Good work.
Mr. Vice Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Doug Anderson. I am the Legislative Director for the Public Service Commission. As Senator Cierpiot alluded to, this was something that was actually a negotiated portion of the securitization bill that passed a couple of years ago. It unfortunately did not make it into the final version, as it was there was a mad scramble for a lot of things that were getting changed at the end. So, as he mentioned, this is just designed to exempt us from the Chapter 34 state procurement process for the bond counsel that we have to hire. The reason for this is simply that the process that we would have to go through through OA for their procurement system, it doesn't fit within the 215 allotted days that we have to rule on the bond issue. So I won't belabor the point here, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Anybody else here to testify in favor of Senate Bill 520? Anybody testify in opposition to Senate Bill 520? Anybody for informational purposes only? That'll conclude the hearing. Mr. Chairman, any concluding thoughts? No? Great, thanks.
All right. Last but not least will be Senate Bill 607. Senator Trent, proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Curtis Trent, representing Senate District 20. Senate Bill 607 tries to address two versions of the same problem, one which is more immediate and one which is more future-oriented. A few years ago, the General Assembly had excluded certain types of real property, solar supporting real property, from taxation. Subsequently, the court struck down that total exclusion, said that there could not be a total exclusion of taxation on solar real property. but instead there need to be some kind of at least nominal taxation. So what this would do is create a de minimis in value for assessment for solar property that would have existed when projects in the state were created under the old taxing regime, with the goal being that those folks should be held harmless since they acted in good faith under the laws that existed at the time. And then there are provisions as well that would be that would set a rate going forward to enable these kinds of investments in the state to continue. However, as I said, one is a more immediate problem than the other. It is the grandfathering clause that is, in my mind, most vitally important that we get done as quickly as possible. But I do think it's important that we eventually get all of the components of this done if we want to see solar investment continue in the state. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions for Senator Trent? Okay. Seeing none, please, how many people want to testify in favor of this bill? Anybody opposed? Okay. First in support, please come forward.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jeremy LaFavor, and I'm here today on behalf of the Clean Grid Alliance, which is an association of some of the largest utility-scale solar developers in the country. We're here today because the industry and our landowners alike support this piece of legislation as a way to bring certainty to the community and to the environment, and as a way of providing vital resources to the local communities where our developers operate in. We also believe that this bill is important at the rate that it currently is, or somewhere close to there. I think that there's some room that we're willing to discuss, but at a rate that's reasonable, because at the end of the day, after we produce electrons, consumers of those electrons purchase them, and the cost that it is to produce them is sent down the line onto those consumers. And so the higher cost of taxation, the higher cost of that electricity as well. Sometimes the higher cost of taxation shuts out some companies, and a lack of competition can lead to increased costs as well. I think it's important to note that utility scale development doesn't occur just because a company wants to do that. Through the regional transmission organizations, MISO and SPP, they take a look and see what's going offline, what's coming back, and what needs to come back online to replace that. To that extent, well, let me get to another piece here. So there's rising demand because for those reasons, and then the levelized cost of energy, and that's when you take out all the subsidies, and the levelized cost of energy for solar is quite a bit lower than it is for many other development forms. And so on the one end, companies are demanding solar energy because it's much cheaper, and companies are also demanding solar energy because it fits with part of their renewable energy goals that their boards have set forward for them. In the queue for the projects that Missouri has, where they go to the regional transmission organizations, the RTOs, MISO and SPP, and they say we want to put some projects there. Right now there are in MISO 23 projects, and SPP there are 20, so 43 total projects at about 9 gigawatts of energy. Without a tax form, and it's left up to the counties to be high or low, the number of those projects that will get developed will be much less. You'll hear from some companies today who have projects in the pipeline already that if we don't do anything this year, that their projects will actually go bankrupt. So we lose, one, the capacity to generate that low-cost electricity for our ratepayers, but then we also lose the benefits, quite frankly, of utility-scale renewable energy in communities. The economic impact analysis, or the Bureau of Economic Research at Missouri State conducted a study recently that looked at the economic impact of solar farms. They looked at wind too, but for our sake, looking at solar, the impact of a new solar farm is 664 new FTEs with increased wages of around $50 million. That's just one project. We've got 40 still in that queue. The point I'm trying to make here is that there is a tremendous amount of demand for the resource that Missouri has readily available, and that is the sun. We have a tremendous number of volunteer landowners who want these projects on their land. They want the income for their communities, they want the income for their families, and they want to be able to keep this resource here locally. And we've got an opportunity to bring local revenue into our communities if we put it at a reasonable enough level, and we believe that $17.50 is that amount. But of course, we're happy to talk with the committee and work with others to get to a point where everybody's a little bit more comfortable. I'm happy to take questions on land use issues or other tax things, but that concludes my prepared remarks, Mr. Chairman.
Have you been here the whole meeting, the whole committee meeting? For
Yes,
all
sir.
the bills? The first bill that Senator Laughlin had, there was a gentleman, I forget his name now, I think it was Randy, who, I'd never heard this before. He said solar is nearly twice as efficient as wind. I thought it was the other way around.
I apologize. I didn't catch that part of his testimony, and I'll take a look at the way that's measured. I'm not. I don't
Okay.
know.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. Next, please, in favor, come forward. And if I could remind everybody, we're crunched on time a little bit, so be as brief as you can be with saying what you want to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Peter Endres. I'm a Vice President of Development with Ranger Power. Ranger is a Chicago-based developer of utility-scale renewable energy projects. We've got a large portfolio that we're working on across the Midwest, including over 1,500 megawatts of solar in the state of Missouri. That represents a potential of $2 billion of capital investment in the next 5 to 7 years in the state. We will begin construction this year on 2 large projects in the state, totaling nearly 400 megawatts. These projects will result in the creation of hundreds of construction jobs and several full-time operations jobs across multiple counties, including Warren, Callaway, and Henry. We take pride in our community-first approach to development, and what that means is that we believe that the communities we work in should benefit from these projects, including financially. Financial benefits must be balanced, however, with cost of energy to ratepayers and other factors. Property taxation should be competitive and attract investment rather than being punitive and discourage new industries like ours. For these reasons, we support Senate Bill 607. It establishes a clear, consistent, competitive framework for solar property taxation. As a nameplate tax, it also does so in a way that leaves little to no discretion of local assessments, which can heavily sway project economics from county to county, depending on the positions and attitudes of assessors. As I mentioned earlier, we will begin construction on 2 Missouri projects this year. For that reason, we urge the legislature to take action on solar property taxes this session. Not doing so leaves us and some of our industry peers in a very significant position of uncertainty that could jeopardize very massive investment in this state. Not to mention new tax revenue to support local services and new stable income for our landowners, who wanted to be here today, by the way, but it's planting season and the sun is shining, so they send their regards. But this is a very important issue for them as well. There's a lot hanging in the balance. We and our industry peers are committed to working together to create a fair and balanced tax structure for utility-scale solar in Missouri, and we'd like to thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Are the assessors doing anything yet? Has any of these solar places had outreach from the assessors about what they're going to do, what their fees are going to be, what the taxes are going to be assessed?
Since in our cases the projects aren't built, it's all a little bit of speculation. But yeah, we've heard some threats. Absolutely.
Well, if they're threats, I mean, paying property tax is not necessarily a threat. What kind of numbers are you hearing about?
There's some uncertainty in the current law about how you would treat or classify solar, and in particular the real property underneath solar.
Whether it's personal or commercial?
It's whether it's commercial or agriculture,
Mhm.
and also the valuation, if it is commercial, what the valuation of that commercial land is. In one of our projects example can be the difference of $20 million in taxes.
Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank
Next
you.
in favor, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for bringing this bill forward. For the record, Jay Hahn on behalf of Strata Solar. And Mr. Chairman, to answer your question, what is the tax liability for some of these projects? I'll briefly go over. Strata is the project that brought forward the Supreme Court case that was handed down in August. That project was built in 2017. It's a 4.9 megawatt project. It's a small project outside of Springfield, Missouri. And in that county, even though an exemption existed in state statute that said solar systems not held for resale shall pay no property tax, the Greene County assessor had a difference of opinion. Over time, those cases were litigated, went to the Supreme Court. We lost that case. Today, the county assessors tell my client that they owe $7 million in taxes up to 2022. That is problematic for Strata because they, as a corporation, don't generate enough profit to pay for that property tax liability. Senator Trent's bill 607 really is the only path forward for that project to remain viable. That project has a purchase power agreement with the city of Springfield. City Springfield is a municipally owned power generator, and the only option for Strata at this point, really, and we've investigated this 7 different ways from Sunday, is to declare bankruptcy before December 31st of this year. If we don't get a tax fix in place. In Senator Trent's bill, if you were to sift through it, it has 3 major components. The first component is for large-scale projects moving forward into 2024. And then we have another section of that bill that is projects that were built between 2013 and 2023. We'd refer to that as grandfathering. That's the provision that we believe would help Strata. And of course, there's projects under 1 megawatt that would be addressed with some sort of de minimis tax. We would recommend under Senator Trent's bill that grandfathering find a way this year because we know there are other small projects across Missouri that will probably also suffer the same fate should they not have remedy under the tax environment. It's important to note this was a private corporation that came in, utilized investor money, put together a pro forma and a business plan that said this is the law of the land in Missouri in 2017, capitalized, built the project, sold the power, entered into an agreement, and then the Supreme Court kind of pulled the rug out from underneath them. I'd be happy to answer any questions. We will be around tomorrow as well to talk to members of this committee.
So this tax bill is for how many years past?
So that's between 2017 and 2022.
So it's 5 years, 20 million, so it's $4 million a year. What's the formula they use to come to that $4 million tax bill?
So that's a good question. No, it is actually less than that amount. I believe that's incorporating penalties. The current tax notification or liability is just shy of about $1 million per year. I don't have the breakdown in front of me, and I haven't been provided that to say this is how they're managing their assessment of that project. Okay. That's just the maximum.
So this company, if things were going as normal, they would owe $5 million without the penalties.
There's an expectation that would be true. There is a depreciation schedule that's referenced on that tax bill. So I believe the longer we go down the path, probably the basis continues to decrease.
Well, will you come by my office? I want to see the numbers.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much, Jay. Next, please, in favor, please come forward. Please fill out a witness form and leave it when you get done. There's some blanks there.
Okay.
And tell us who you are and go ahead.
All right. My name's Troy Hake. I'm a local business owner and property owner, and I'm here just in general support of solar. I actually have solar on my property, not utility scale solar, rooftop solar with about 150 kilowatt hours of storage on site. I power my workshop, barns, shed, house with solar, and I feel like the more we can do to responsibly develop regional generation, I think is a smart idea. At the same time, I would not like to see it structured in such a way that the costs get passed down, whether it's through initial development costs or taxation over time. Those costs generally get passed down the line to the consumer, which makes it somewhat, unattractive, and I feel that we should be that can come from it, to be able to find a way that that this can be responsibly done without a lot of additional costs being passed to the consumer, but maybe more importantly from the developer's point of view, that it's predictable and consistent what their development costs are going to be, or they're going to be very discouraged from even attempting to try to do a project like this, because if it's not predictable, they just don't know what to build into their development costs for some of these items, and I think it's just going to kill a lot of projects before they even have a chance to get started. And like I said, I think regional generation is a good idea to pursue.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Just you can bring that witness form back up after you fill it out. Next in favor, please come forward. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to speak in favor of the bill. I can wait, or
Mm-hmm.
I can speak now, whatever your preference is.
It's first come, first serve, so just first come, first serve. If you're ready, go ahead. If you're ready, go ahead and just sit down and give your testimony. Yeah.
Do you mind if I put this up? Remember, I have.
Yes, you can. Yes.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
All right. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Mark Gardner, and I'm the president of Gardner Solar in Springfield, Missouri. I was also served on the task force as a member of the advocating party for the solar energy industry, and so I have that background. I'm here to speak in favor of Senate Bill 607, and particularly the first paragraph. If you look at the first paragraph and the second paragraph of 607, they're very different. 607 2 focuses on the future, projects that are going to be built in the future. Section 137, proposed Section 137-077 deals with the past, projects that have already been built. And that's really that's the section I'm concerned with today. A lot of projects were built at a time when Section 137-110 was in effect. And that was a statute which exempted solar systems from taxation. And there were several projects built. They were mostly small, 5 megawatt, 3 megawatt projects, and they were built with, not with opposition from the communities, but with community support. Every project we built had substantial community support because we weren't large, we weren't dense, didn't have high density, but we were welcomed in the communities. Now, the Supreme Court in August of 2023 said that the statute in question was unconstitutional because the legislature does not have the authority to grant a real estate tax exemption, a full exemption, to any for-profit entity. And therefore that statute was invalid, and therefore all of these solar projects that were built in reliance on the statute are now subject to tax. The problem with that is it creates a very, very serious problem for the developers, the bankers, and the investors of these projects. How the projects work is I initially, as a developer, will run a financial model, and you take into consideration every financial situation you can envision. You run a model and you ask yourself, does this work or does it not work? If it works, you go forward. Then you have to go get a bank and you show them your financial model. And here it was not only my financial information, but appraisals. The projects had to be appraised, and they were appraised assuming no property taxes. So the banks look at my model and the appraisal, and they decide it's a financially feasible project, and they agree to loan money on it. Then you have to have a federal investor who will buy the federal tax credits, actually invests in the project, puts money into the project to get the credits. He does the same thing. He looks at the financial model, he looks at the appraisal, concludes that the project works. The problem is the project does in fact work without the property taxes. But when you throw the property taxes on top of these projects, most of them are losing money. They can't make money with the property taxes. And if you ask the banks, would you have loaned money on this project if there was a property tax? They would tell you no. If you ask the federal investor, would you have loaned money on this project if there was real estate tax? They would say no. So what would have happened is those projects either wouldn't have been built, or somehow we would have had to negotiate higher rates, PPA rates, with utilities for those cities that off took that electricity. So the problem is it's almost retroactive in its effect. You know, everybody relied on the lack of property taxes. Now we have them, and we're trying to find a way to make this work, notwithstanding the change in the statute and the fact that, as it stands, we're subject to being taxed at full rate.
I'm sorry today, we have committee members that just have appropriations, and so they've fed out. So make sure you meet with them separately outside of this meeting. Any questions for Mark? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next in favor, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Catherine Gensler. I serve as Vice President of Government Affairs and Marketing for Arevon. At Arevon, we develop, own, and operate utility-scale storage and solar power plants, supplying energy to utilities, corporations, and educational institutions across 17 states. I'm here today to express Arevon's support for SB607. We're developing a project in southeast Missouri, our first in the state. Landowners in Scott County have agreed to lease land sufficient to host more than 200 megawatts of solar panels, which is enough to generate electricity that will power more than 35,000 typical Missouri homes. We have all been thrown a curveball by the state Supreme Court. We want our project here in Scott County to be successful and the opportunity to bring other projects to Missouri. But we need to be confident in the property tax system, or the projects just won't be economical investments for us. What we want to see in any solar property tax legislation are the following: competitive property tax rates, especially compared to neighboring states. We just can't justify committing investment dollars to the state of Missouri if we could go next door and generate electricity for cheaper. We want a predictable statewide tax regime, and we want to maintain the opportunity to negotiate with counties for an EEZ or other tax abatement in order to meet the needs both of the project and the local community. SB607 meets all of these goals. Our Scott County project offers landowners a way to diversify their land's revenue base and preserves their ability to return the land to agricultural use at the conclusion of the project. We have plenty of opportunities to talk about what changes might be made in terms of the property tax regime, but SB 607 is a great start. We encourage you to adopt a property tax policy for Missouri that continues its position as a good place to do business, and urge you to pass SB 607. Mr. Chairman, I do want to address your question posed earlier about the relative efficiencies of solar and wind assets. I too heard the statement from the witness earlier today, and I can't believe that 2x is really the right ratio between solar and wind efficiencies. That number sounds incorrect, particularly for the state of Missouri. So we're happy to do a little more research and get you some real figures there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I would be happy to take any questions.
Questions of this witness? There's none. Thank you very much.
All right.
Next in favor, please come forward.
Due to the time crunch, my name's Susan Henderson Moore. I want to go on record in favor of the legislation and reiterate the comments of Clean Grid Alliance on behalf of NextEra.
Thank you. Excellent testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Nolan for MOSIA, and I would just say that one of the things about my new entrance into the solar field is that you meet great, smart legislators who have perfect bills and smart testimony before me that is more eloquent and more complete. I left an info brief. I'm also dropping off the Renew Missouri's representatives, both in support of this fine piece of legislation. Thanks for your service this summer. Sorry it was a tight timeline. $125,000 per megawatt on the quick math if it's $650,000 tax bill. I think we have a crisis. Let's fix it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Nolan? Seeing none. Next in favor, please come forward. Anybody in opposition, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Steve Hobbs, Executive Director for the Missouri Association of Counties, here to talk in opposition about Senate Bill 607. Many parts of this bill we've understood, we've worked with over the years. I want to talk specifically about the assessment portion of the bill. There is a clear standard in the state of Missouri right now. The Missouri assessors are tasked under a constitution with a fair and accurate assessment of property, and that's their job. They do not decide what the tax levies are. Their job is assessment. For personal property, like solar panels, those are self-reported by the agencies. They say what that value is, and the assessor applies the formula to that. And then other agencies within county government apply the tax codes on it to come up with what the tax bill is on that. We have great partners in Missouri that are already working with counties that are building solar, that are working out agreements. And I really applaud those folks, even before the Supreme Court decision came down, that they were saying, hey, we want to be good corporate citizens. We want to work with you and the various taxing entities because most of these solar farms are in rural areas. And the largest benefactor of these solar farms are going to be the public schools. And so our locally elected officials worked with schools to look at what was fair, what would work. And there are agreements in place right now or are being put in place for solar farms in Missouri that are in the $2,000 per megawatt, and the land underneath the panels is assessed commercially because that's what it is under our current statutes. It's not ag farmland. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done. I think there's some common ground. I think we can work together to get some places. I know, Senator, you sat on that solar task force, and there are formulas out there that we had pretty close agreement on, but we never were able to get them across the line. And then once the Supreme Court decision came down that said because that had never been taken to a vote, that exemption was null and void, efforts to negotiate or to find common ground kind of fell apart, and now they're kind of revving up again. So it's been a long day. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Steve. So of your assessor friends around the state that are starting to get into this area now, what it seems to be The question is, from the assessment point of view, is what do you value them at? What percentage of the actual costs that they put in, or something? So, are they using that method? The assessors around the state that are starting to look at these.
I think because of the lack of legislation that was in place. Okay, first you started out where we had solar agencies that came in and says, hey, we're tax exempt, we're not going to pay anything. By the way, we're going to build in your county. And we said, fine, you're not crossing our roads. Guess what? They came back a few months later and said, yeah, we want to work with you. And so some counties are looking at entering into Chapter 100 agreements with them to lower that tax bill. There's been talk of formulas that would lower that amount. It's also really important to the counties and the school districts to capture the increase in assessed valuation, where with a payment in lieu of taxes and a per megawatt, you don't do that. That directly affects their bonding capabilities when they need to build buildings or schools. So right now, if nothing changes this year, and when assessment goes next year, they're going to ask in a form for what the personal property is worth on the property for the solar farm once it's constructed, and the company will give them a value and they will apply the personal property tax code to that, and then they will look at the acreage that the land is on there, because there's very, very clear definitions of personal property is what can be easily removed, and real property is what cannot easily be removed. And we're struggling with that in the General Assembly right now, but that's what the statute reads currently.
And so the land underneath it then becomes, rather than productive value, it becomes commercial value.
Right.
And then the commercial rate, and then the tax levy lays on top of that.
Right.
Okay. And how does a $5 million tax bill become a $20 million with penalties? Is that typical?
That doesn't, I'd have to look at that, Senator, because that doesn't quite add up to me.
Thank you. Other questions for the senators? Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Anybody else in opposition, please come forward.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm a whipping post here because I'm Boone County Assessor. All right. First off, Senate Bill 607. Basically, the assessor would have to back in to the valuation using the $1,750 per megawatt. To give you an example, I've got a 10 megawatt facility on the east side of the city of Columbia. At the current time, of course, it has been exempt. I'm working on getting it put on the tax rolls this year. Based on that, the tax bill would be $17,500. Currently, the land tax bill underneath that, 90 acres, is $42,000. And that's in the commercial subclass. And I valued it using an industrial $20,000 an acre value, which is what the industrial land in Boone County would sell for. I have a large tract right next door to this that sold for $5 a foot. $217,000 an acre. Still commercial, but yet I put the land underneath the solar panels on for considerably less than that. So I'm reasonable. I try to be conservative when it comes to these because I do know it's very sensitive. Along with that, assessors don't talk taxes. We talk value. Our job is to value it in true value money, ad valorem taxes. There is a residential component, in my opinion, of these solar panels. That would be the substructure underneath, along with the land. The solar panels themselves, I would consider them as personal property. And Missouri law, the way we have to handle personal property, is very, very business friendly. We have to use a macros depreciation. According to the IRS code, these solar panels are depreciated in a 5-year period when they residual out at 20%. So that's very, very favorable to these. All I ask is for these companies to work with me and my fellow assessors so we can get these put on at their original cost, and then we can depreciate them. So you know, I know that there's got to be some common ground here, and I know I'm willing to work towards any kind of resolution we can come up with. I'm open to that. So until we come up with something, it's kind of like a wild, wild west right now. Because yeah, we don't know. I don't know what my other assessors are doing as a, you know, with their panels, but I do know what my intentions are for this year. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Will you go back to that initial example you're using? You said that you were taxing them at, is going to be 17, you said 10 acres, is that what it is?
It's a 90-acre site.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm valuing it at $20,000 an acre, which is what industrial land in Boone County is.
Just raw land, that's what it goes for.
Just raw land,
right.
that's
Okay.
exactly right.
And then you lay and so it's $20,000 an acre, and you value it off the commercial rate, which is 32% or whatever, right?
That is correct, yes, sir.
And then the levy on that. And what happens now that they put solar panels on it? You're taxing it, you're going to tax that plus the solar property tax rate?
Yeah. I don't follow your question.
Okay,
Sorry.
you say you have a new solar farm that this year you're assessing because of the law change.
Yes.
And how are you assessing that?
How am I going to assess that? The land will stay as it is, commercial.
Commercial.
Okay. I'm trying to reach out to the company. I've reached out to them a couple of times. Have not gotten any response from them.
Okay.
So I'm trying to work with them. I wish they would work with me.
Was the land assessed before they were paying tax on it with the solar property on it, or is it completely off the tax rolls?
No,
before
no,
the Supreme Court.
The land has always been taxed, and the reason is the solar company does not own the land.
Okay.
There's a land lease in place there.
Okay.
So it's a different entity that owns the land versus what's owned.
And you don't have a formula yet for the solar equipment itself?
We have nothing on the solar equipment.
Okay, thank you.
It's been exempt.
Okay. Any questions for this witness? Thank you very much. Anybody else in opposition, please come forward. Anybody for information purposes?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Zach Monroe on behalf of Ameren, Missouri. We're here for informational purposes only today because we are neither against nor for the proposal as it's presented, because there's some specific things that are unique to our company compared to the private developers in determining the property tax valuation on these solar farms. The first is based on how our assets are assessed at the State Tax Commission for central assessment. We gather all FERC accounts for our generation assets in total, and then the localized valuation, such as that of the nuclear fuel, coal piles, the wind towers, they're then taken the local valuation, and then it's subtracted against the state pool, the state pot of valuation that we have submitted. So we need, in any property tax assessments that go to local taxation, which we firmly support local taxation on this, we need to make sure we have accurate market valuations and depreciations on those assets to accurately do that calculation at the tax commission. The second thing is we also need to make sure we have an accurate delineation between personal property assessed, real property assessed, because of the surtaxes associated with the real property, and that is something that we don't know is clear in this legislation as it stands. The grandfather clause has been spoken to. We support that based on the fact of when we built our solar generation, it was done under the law of no solar tax, and then or no property tax on solar, excuse me, and so customers have never been paying a property tax there. Starting this year, based on the ruling from last year, that will go into effect, and property taxes will have to be collected on that, so that'll be a new taxation passed through to the ratepayer via central assessment based on the law.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Anybody else for information purposes? That will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 607, and we are adjourned. I got to get out of the ropes.